Good morning, everyone. Hope you're doing well. As you can see, I got my coffee out here in the truck. I'm prepared to do yet another video, and this one is quite interesting, actually. This is an interesting topic. There's a lot that could be said on this one, but we're just gonna jump in here. We're going to be talking about kind of the conditions of the last day, but more specifically, there's a verse in Matthew that talks about the last days being as the days of Noah, or as in the days before Noah got into the ark, or went into the ark with all the animals, and what was that like. So let's go ahead and read that verse just to get started, and then we're going to go to chapter 6 of Genesis. Some pretty interesting stuff there. So what does Matthew have to say about this? So we're just going to go ahead and read Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 through 39, and then we'll go from there. So here we go. Verse 37. But as the days of Noah were, so also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, in the King James, it says no. I don't know why. N-O-E. I don't know why it just doesn't say Noah, but obviously that's who we're talking about, and maybe somebody more of a biblical scholar would know why it's spelled that way. All right, so let's in Matthew. So let's go to Genesis chapter 6. And this is where it gets real interesting. So before we dive into this, it kind of paints, Matthew kind of paints this picture of just sort of this normal life. Everybody going about their daily business, marrying, getting married, doing, life. Like, there's not some grand sign outside of that, other than what were the days of Noah like apart from just say daily life. Well, some pretty interesting stuff, really. Okay, let's just read this, and I'm gonna have to stop a couple times and talk a little bit about what we're reading, and then just continue on. So this is this weird thing where there's sort of some hybrids or something. I can't figure it out. Like, best I could say is like maybe these are some demonic hybrids, but they're called sons of God. It's an interesting passage. Yeah, we're just going to dive in. I'll leave my thoughts. You guys put your thoughts in. I'm not, I'm no biblical expert or anything. I'm just leaving my thoughts onto what I'm reading here. And I'm not saying that they're absolutely 100%, the biblical authority here. So just really just my personal thoughts as I read. And as I said, you guys can put your thoughts on this stuff in the comments as well, and we'll have a nice little discussion. So the flood, chapter 6 of Genesis. And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives of all which they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not always strive with man, for that he also is flesh. Yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old of renown. So this is talking about some sort of hybrid, like a man becoming to the daughters of men, but they're not. They're part. They say they're not fully human, whatever they are. So now they're called sons of God, so that would lend you to think that they were good, but then the result of this is so bad you have to kind of draw the conclusion that these were actually some sort of demonic hybrid, honestly. So let's just read the next verse. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. So if this was truly like of God, even though he's calling them sons of God, but if this was truly something of God, the result, of course, wouldn't be that, what we're seeing in verse 5. So it just brought my mind around to an interesting correlation, what's happening in our society, where we're heading towards sort of, we're talking about putting computer chips in people that make people supercomputers. We're talking about this weird hybrid stuff where we're blending men, humans and machine together, and it reminds me of this. There's a correlation here. There's so much to think about here, but let's just break it down and make it as simple as possible for the sake of this video. When we first Matthew talks about how the pre-flood conditions are similar to the conditions before Christ comes back. And it's interesting that this is one of the big things that stands out, is this blending of the sons, what they're calling the son. The scriptures are saying the sons of God here, coming into the daughters of men, and the results, these mighty men of old, men of renown. And then the very next verse talks about this wickedness that was in the earth, as just basically had to be obviously a result of this. And it even goes on in verse 6, it's so bad that God repented the Lord that he had made on earth, and it grieved him at his heart. So it's so ugly that God was just grieved. He just regretted that he'd even made man at this point. That's how bad it was. And if you can imagine that we get to this point here in our society where we're blending people and machines together and doing all these godlike things, isn't that similar to this? I mean, we could go a lot deeper, but I'm just trying to I think I'm just scratching the surface by saying there's some similarities here, and the accuracy of what the scripture is saying when it talks about the days of Noah being as it was in the days of Noah, so it shall be before the second coming. And usually I just read that verse in Matthew thinking of, just like the marrying and all that. But when you go back here and read, you could see this other big correlation. And then you look in our society and you can see that we're headed that way, where I think some people do even have computer chips in them and stuff that are making them superhuman and all these different things. So you guys throw in your thoughts on this, but I see a pretty strong correlation there. And so we're going to read verse 7. And the Lord said, I will destroy man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. But Noah found grace in the eyes of the Lord. And then it goes into, these are the generations of Noah. It goes into all that, and the making of the ark. And then chapter 7 talks about the actual flood and stuff. But for today, we're just going to end there with that thought about these similarities between these two time frames, and that we are actually seeing some pretty strong correlations between you know, what the scriptures say about then and now. And it makes me wonder if the technology wasn't a lot more advanced than we ever thought it was, and perhaps it was. I don't know. That time, there could have been a lot more. I mean, we tend to think, of course, that time as, you know, they were rubbing two sticks together type of time, but the technology could have been very advanced. It could be a lot different than what we have in our minds about what that time was like. But most certainly, we know that the level of wickedness was just out of sight for God to just basically, he was absolutely grieved and at what was happening. And as we advance in this world that we're doing, the things we're doing right now, I'm not saying believers, of course, there's the sectors, but I'm saying as a whole, as a globe, as a society, what's happening in our world, I imagine, you know, that makes sense that we're kind of in that same time frame. So right before the second coming, and the things that our society is wanting to do, godlike things, basically, and make you know, make ourselves gods, essentially. It always comes back to that. Interesting how it always comes back to that, isn't it? Like, interesting how it always comes back to men wanting to be God, basically. We want to control our own destiny, masters of our own destiny, which is, and then that goes back to that tie back to Satan himself, who wants to be God. It's interesting how connected that really is, and just, there's a lot of depth there. It's an interesting thing to think about, and I think we barely scratched the surface today, but feel free to throw in your comments on this. We may talk about this some more going forward, but I read this yesterday, and I was like, we got to talk about this some on the channel. So, all right, you guys, hope you're doing great. God bless you. I'll catch you on the next video.